G'day, Michelle. This is a great question, and this is something that does come up quite often. And there is a mechanism in which you can put in place as part of your estate plan that can provide you with additional protection for spendthrift beneficiaries or people that are a higher risk of essentially mismanaging the money, whether that be because of age or because of circumstance or because of their business dealings, whatever that might be. And it is referred to as a testamentary discretionary trust. Let me show a diagram and I'm going to explain to you how this works because it can get a little bit complicated. Okay, so when we talk about an estate, essentially what happens is that an individual passes away and that will enact their will. Now, hopefully you've got a will, and that will basically determines the assets that you hold, the liabilities that you have, and how you want the net estate to be distributed to your beneficiaries. In that will, it appoints an executor. An executor is basically a project manager. They can also be a beneficiary if you wish. And their job is to find those assets, pay down the debts, deal with any taxes that may come up or other expenses, reach probate, an agreement of how that residual estate is going to be distributed, and then that will typically get distributed directly to beneficiaries in a basic will. Now, the issue with that is that in that particular circumstance, once those individuals receive that money, there's no recourse, there's no rules, there's no control. So they can basically do with it as they wish. Now, they can spend it as they wish, but the other challenge there is if they've got a relationship that subsequently breaks down, that becomes a marital asset, or if they're chased by creditors due to a business not going well, then that is also part of the assets that creditors can pursue as well. So we look to implement what we call a testamentary trust. And a testamentary trust is basically a clause, a component of your will that states that in the event that you pass away and probate basically granted, the residual estate will go into a trust structure whereby a trustee is appointed. It could be the same as an executor. So maybe it's your surviving spouse, maybe it's another family member, somebody who is separate to the at-risk beneficiary, who is now held to a certain standard as part of the trust deed of how that money is managed on behalf of the beneficiaries of the testamentary trust. So you may say that, okay, they can't access it to a particular age. So as a general rule of thumb for our clients, we typically advocate that until the kids are 25, if we don't want them calling the shots, there needs to be a trustee. Some kids, we put it at 30. Some who may have a history of drug or alcohol dependence or have addictions, then we basically say that a trustee must be responsible at all points in time for managing that money and distributing that money. Further to that, you can also dictate how money is used. So you may say, okay, you can't use money for gambling, let's say. You can only use money from the trust to buy a principal place of residence, to pay off debts, to get educated, start a business. You could basically create as many rules as you like. Any trustee is bound by their basically trustee obligations to follow that trust deed and enact your wishes. Now, the great thing about this is that a testamentary trust can run for up to 80 years, and it can only pass to lineal descendants. So as I mentioned before, if there is a relationship breakdown, anything that's in the testamentary trust doesn't form part of that marital estate. Same thing protecting against creditors in business, and it can only get passed to lineal descendants and protects against their relationship breakdown and whatnot in the future. So it's a really great way for you to create basically what we refer to as a bloodline trust, which provides a lot of great benefits. The other benefit, I'm not sure if this applies to you, but this will apply to others, is that if you've got young kids under the age of 18, the minor tax rules are really, really aggressive, meaning that basically most kids will lose about 50% of all of the gains that they make on any investment income. Whereas if you've left their money in a testamentary trust, they're actually treated as an adult for tax purposes. And for that reason, they get $19,000 a year from the tax-free threshold and the usual normal adult tax rates. So they pay much, much less tax than if they received that inheritance themselves and that was invested on their behalf whilst they are under the age of 18. So a testamentary trust is very common when we implement estate planning for our clients. I cover this off extensively in my book to give you a crash course of how it all works. You really need to work with an estate planning specialist who understands these types of things. Not all lawyers recommend testamentary trust because they just prefer to keep it really simple. But as you can see, there are a lot of benefits, particularly in a circumstance like this, where a testamentary trust can be really valuable. If you have any other questions about estate planning, feel free to let me know in the comments. I hope this has been helpful.